TI10 is just around the corner, so I figured this would be a good time to record a couple of tier list videos so that I don't have that thing happen like I did when I made that POS 5 guide, where something like a week later we had a new patch that invalidated a lot of the stuff I talked about in that video. But now we're probably going to have maybe like a month or two until we get the next patch. So this is a good time. I'm going to start with a carry video here, but then also do tier lists on the other roles later. And this list is based primarily around high-level pub play, so not pro-level play, because if you're playing a TI, you probably don't need me to tell you what to pick. And it's also not based around lower-level pubs, because in those games, if you're in like 1k, 2k, 3k, balance really does not matter all that much. It's just all about being comfortable with the hero you're playing, and anything can work. But once you get to like 4k, 5k, 6k, things actually matter a lot in terms of balance, and you can't just pick any old hero and do well. And it's also going to be based primarily around stats. So it's like a fairly objective list. This is not just my opinion. So I looked at stats from things like Dota 2 Pro Tracker, which is very high level pubs, and looked at Immortal and Divine level stats from Dota Plus and from Dota Buff to determine which heroes to put into which tier. So first of all, we're going to start with the S tier. These are heroes that are incredibly powerful, that you can just pick pretty much every game and have a good time. First of all, we have Medusa, who traditionally has for a long time has been kind of a mediocre hero, but in this current patch is actually doing really well. She, of course, is a hero that farms very well. She doesn't actually need any sort of farming items to farm well. You can, of course, go for things like a Mask of Madness, but very often we'll see Medusas just get something like a Dragon Lance after Treads, obviously, and then just go for something like a Manta Star, which is sort of a hybrid farming and fighting item. And that just makes Medusa a hero that actually comes online reasonably quickly, but still just scales really well into the late game. You have a good amount of early game magic damage with the snake, and the ultimate is always very powerful in team fights. And then obviously she's very hard to burst once you have a couple of items. She can sort of 1v5. And you can also play in the mid lane, but if you play in the mid lane, you need to make sure that you have a carry that's less space intensive. You need to have some sort of active carry then, which can work, but definitely no matter whether you're playing her in the mid lane or in the safe lane, she's going to be your position 1 hero. And obviously Medusa is very good at clearing stacks, so if you have a support that can make you some stacks, that's really helpful. But you can also make stacks for yourself to some extent and then just farm them with your split shot and your snake. So Medusa just a very stable carry in this current meta. Then we have Tiny, who's a bit more of an aggressive carry, but just very strong, also very versatile pick. You can easily pick him early on, like in pubs, you can pick him in the second phase, you can have no problem. You can even pick him in the first phase, although that's not as usual. But if you pick in the first phase, you actually kind of confuse your opponents a bit, and maybe they'll assume that it's like a +4 Tiny. Speaking of which, a big advantage of Tiny is that he can be played in lots of different roles. And carry's probably the strongest role right now, but mid lane is also perfectly viable, +3 or 4 perfectly viable as well, which is also why I think it's going to be seen a lot at TI. I think it's pretty much going to be always picked or banned in the first phase in almost all games, because he's just so strong, so versatile. Obviously, you have a good amount of magic burst damage, but you also scale quite well as Tiny. Obviously, that shard is very key to making carry Tiny work. Just having no charge limit on those trees is amazing. So always gonna get that shard when it's available, and you're gonna have a good time. You can actually farm quite fast on Tiny. He's still not gonna scale like super well, like certainly a lot less than a hero like Medusa, but he makes up for it in having a high tempo playstyle, and he's sort of versatile in the fact that he can farm well, but he can also just fight with the team early, and that's why it's also perfect if you're doing some sort of push strats. and just need a carry that can come online early and also offers a good amount of disable, which oftentimes, if you have these kind of zoo-style push strats, sometimes you're going to lack that catch and initiation and so on, and that's what a Tiny can provide. Next, we have the A tier, which are heroes that are above average, but not broken. So we have Naga, very fast farmer, one of the fastest in the game. She has a really high win rate, but she's not picked all that much, which is why I'm only in A tier. But I can definitely see this hero gaining more popularity as the meta develops further in this patch. So she might be up in S tier in the future. Then we have Viva, who's a very versatile hero, kind of similar to Tiny, can be played in multiple different roles, and just does excel as well as a carry. Very survivable hero, obviously. A hero that does not need much babysitting, and he's like a good carry to pick if you have a bit more of a greedy mid laner. Because while he does scale fairly well, he's a fairly independent hero and can do well even if he doesn't get the perfect start. Then we have Arc Warden, who's probably a bit more popular in the mid lane, but even if you play him in the mid lane, similar to Medusa, he's still going to be your position 1. So this is a very fast farming hero, very strong in the late game, but he struggles a bit against more like early pressure lineups because he's just not that strong if he doesn't have the first, like, 3-4 items. Obviously very strong split pushing, and he's a bit of a situational hero, kind of similar to Naga. High win rate, but low pick rate. So I'm putting him here in A tier. You have Ursa, who's a sort of strong tempo carry. You can also farm reasonably well if you go for something like a Battle Fury build, or you can also go for more aggressive builds. And he's just a nice, solid laner, and he's not skilled super well in the late game, but his mid game strength is enough to put him here into A tier. Similar thing goes Monkey King. Again, you can go for like a Battle Fury build and then farm a bit more, or you can go for like an Echo Saber and just be more aggressive. But Monkey King, just a strong, solid hero. Not many counters to him, especially now that he's like not as much of an anti-melee hero anymore. Has some more armor in return, so you can also do decently well against some sort of ranged offlaner. Although, of course, you ideally want to play him against some sort of slower melee offlaner, like a TI10, for example. Ricky is kind of a tricky hero to place because he does really well in low MMR games. He very high win rates there. But then, as you get higher, he falls off a little bit, but he's still not that bad. So I'm putting him in A tier. You could also argue that he should be in B tier. It's kind of tricky to place him. TA, primarily a mid hero, but also works quite well as a carry. And he's just overall a strong hero. A tier, why not? Chaos Knight, I think, is a bit of an underrated hero. He doesn't farm all that fast, but he has a good sustain. Doesn't really have to go back to base because he can always just region up with his Chaos Strike. And just so much single target damage and disable. And just a sort of a great kind of tempo carry, which does really well in more aggressive lineup. Or if you have a greedier mid laner. So it's a bit of a situational hero, but in those games where he's good, he's really good. Basis Void, a very versatile carry, can do sort of a lot of things on his own. You're not as reliant on your team because you can sort of get solo kills with your Chronosphere, but you're also a stronger team fight with a good, well-placed Chronosphere. Yeah, he's just a strong, solid hero. Bloodseeker is a bit of an unusual carry. He's a very aggressive carry, doesn't scale all that well, but can do a lot in the mid game. High kill potential, stronger team fighting, stronger pickoffs. Wraith King is one of those heroes that's primarily strong in lower brackets, but he's also actually doing really well up here. Now we're into the B tier. These are more sort of balanced heroes. They're neither too strong nor too weak. You can play them if you like them or if there's a good game for them. But if you're new to the carry role or you want to learn a new carry, probably don't learn one of these. Probably should stick to these kinds of heroes. And the ideal strategy as a carry, because you're typically going to be picking the second or last phase, is you want to have like a decent sized hero pool. You probably want to have like 2 or 3 heroes that you main, and then like maybe another 2 or 3 heroes as sort of backups to get to cover different situations. But these in the B tier, if you're already playing them, you can keep playing them, but you probably shouldn't start with playing them. So the first of all, you have Morphling here, who is kind of a specialist hero. You need to be really good at Morphling to make him work. And a lot of people actually overestimate their Morphling abilities, which is why this hero just typically just does not have all those high win rates, but he's still picked a decent amount, which is why he's sort of at the top of B tier. But if you're really good at this hero, you can definitely make him work, but it's probably not worth learning right now. Phantom Lancer is a bit of situational hero. That's against some lineups, PL just also wins the game as long as you manage to, not lose in the first 30 minutes. But then there are also games where Phantom Lancer is just a bit too slow. He comes online rather slowly, also doesn't farm that fast. Luna used to be one of the most powerful carries, then she's been nerfed a bit, and now she's kind of just sort of in the middle of the pack. She's still fine, but nothing great about her. Slark, sort of similar situation. It was like a really good Slark game. You can make a lot of things happen. And he's kind of a snowball hero, so if you have a good early game, you can definitely dominate, but he's not that great. Similar situation for Lifestealer. And by the way, also Juggernaut. Lifestealer and Jug are kind of similar in that they're these fairly well-rounded melee carries. They have this magic immunity spell that they can sort of rely on, so they're never going to be all that bad, but that's just nothing particularly exciting about them. Next, we have Lycan and Lone Druid. Again, sort of similar situation between those two, in that they're more specialist heroes. You need to be actually really good on these heroes to make them work, and they also can definitely be countered, so they're quite good in certain particular games, but there's also games where they just don't do very much, and they're both kind of snowbally heroes, in that if you're having a bad game with these heroes, you can feel pretty useless. But these heroes still have good win rates, but with very low pick rates. So this is specialists picking them and people picking them in very good games for these particular heroes. But yeah, this is probably not heroes that you want to learn right now. But if you're already good in those heroes, you can keep playing them in games where it's favorable for them. Gyro, which is kind of meh. He was kind of meta for a little bit, but then he got nerfed again, and now he's just kind of bad. Not terrible, but nothing spectacular about him. Spectre is a hero that still does quite well in lower brackets, but once you get up here, she's a bit below average. So just one of those heroes that's really good if he gets to the late game, and that's why she's good in lower MMR games, because people are just less disciplined and worse at taking objectives. So there's a lot of sort of back and forth, people throw back and forth, and these kinds of games are where Spectre excels. Similar thing for Anti-Mage. He's also a hero that just relies on farming a lot before he's ready to fight. Even more so than Spectre, to be honest. But I can still be good at Anti-Mage games, and then he can still do fine, so he's not a bad hero necessarily. Terrorblade, right now it's just kind of a worse version of Naga. So just if you want to pick Terrorblade, just pick Naga instead. PA is kind of underwhelming. She is rather squishy when she doesn't have a BKB yet, so definitely there can be good PA games, but usually there's better heroes to pick. Razor does not scale all that well. She doesn't farm well, so he's not that suitable to the carry role. But if you need like a very high tempo carry that sort of more or less supports a more farming intensive mid, that Razor can be a decent pick. But most of the time in that situation, you're better off picking something like a Tiny or a Monkey King. But in certain lane matchup counters, he can still be worth picking. Sniper and Drow are kind of similar heroes. They're both pretty decent in lower tiers, but once people are actually good at initiating and jumping on you, they fall off a lot. And we have Klinks, is good at pick-offs, also decent at team fighting with all the skeletons. But he just doesn't really have the oomph he had because he just was nerfed a lot. Sven also a kind of a nerfed hero. You can still make him work if you get lots of stacks. But especially in pubs with solo queuing, that's not necessarily going to be reliable. So I would just gravitate towards picking other heroes. Like a Dusa also benefits a lot from stacks, but she can still do fine if there's not much stacking. Whereas Sven just kind of needs to have stacks to function. Similar story for Alchemist. He's so reliant on stacks. And like even if he gets good stacks, he's still not that great. So I wouldn't really recommend him. Bristleback, after the nerf to the Aghanims, he's just no longer that powerful. He's still good in low MR games, but once people actually know how to play against Bristleback, he does not do all that well. And we have Troll, that's just in general underwhelming. There's just no particular reason to pick Troll. There's just other heroes who do what he does much better. Nature's Prophet is just very underwhelming right now. It's a very high skill hero. You need to be really a Nature's Prophet specialist to make him work. And even then he's not that good, so I would just stay away from that hero. And then Huskar is just bad overall, and if you want to play Huskar, you probably want to play him in mid because he just needs a lot of levels. It's just hard for Huskar to actually do things. You need to end the game early, and he's not that good at taking objectives, so I would recommend not to pick Huskar. So that's my carry list. Hopefully this has been of some use to you. And as I said, I'm going to do more tier lists for the other roles as well. So if you're interested in that, please hit that subscribe button. And all is willing, I'll see you next time.